Hello, church. Welcome to this week's broadcast. My name is Henry Loke. This is God's Feeding Station. Great to be with you again this week as we continue in the book of Matthew with myself, Pastor Doug, from yesteryear, not too long ago, 10 years ago, 2016. Going through the book of Matthew, revisiting these broadcasts. Today, we are in Matthew 5, verses 33 through 37. Talking about oaths.
This is God's Feeding Station. We're at it again, another latest broadcast. I'm Pastor Doug White in Boulder, Colorado. I know we're in the book of Matthew on this podcast. Henry Loke is in another studio. He's going to give us the coordinates and the title.
I need my glasses first.
Okay.
We are in 5, 33 through 37.
Okay.
Oaths.
Okay, just oaths. Yeah.
Oaths.
Well, I know that for those of you that have been following along, we've been going through the book of Matthew and kind of breaking down verse by verse, section by section, and Jesus has been talking about being the fulfillment of the law. And obviously, most of us know, if you've read your Bibles, he fulfills the law with the great love. He will get there more and more coming up as we get to the end of chapter 5. We learn more of these things, but he's teaching along the way. He's been saying stuff like, you shouldn't commit a murder, but even more than that, shouldn't have anger in your heart. And then he's like, you've heard it said, you shouldn't do this, but I'm going to tell you there's more than that. And he points to the heart, and then he goes into relationships, and he talks about adultery and all kinds of sin against relationships and how to deal with it. Our last broadcast, we were talking about divorce. Seems that it came from a hardness of the heart. And this week, we moved over into oaths. So here we are in Matthew 5. I'm going to read 33 through 37 into the broadcast, and we'll unpack it a little bit. So again, you have heard that it was said, this is Jesus talking, by the way, again, you have heard it said that to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but keep your oaths you've made to the Lord. And I'm thinking he's pointing them back to the Ten Commandments. And then in verse 34, he says, but I tell you, don't swear at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. Simply let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. This should be fun.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I was looking through Barclay, the commentary, and he said there were there are two unsatisfactory things about taking oaths. He said the first was called frivolous swearing, and taking an oath where it was necessary. And then he says the second one was he says in that frivolous swearing, he said far too often people use the most sacred language in the most meaningless way. And he said they take sacred names upon their lips in the most thoughtless and irreverent way. Sacred names should be kept for sacred things. And so...
so who are we to invoke God's throne and stuff like that? Well,
right. And he says the other thing was that when people would swear, if they swore by God, then they felt that God was part of the equation and they had to keep the oath. If they swore by anything else, like his head or by Jerusalem or whatever, then it was very easy. They didn't feel, that it was a big deal to break that oath.
Right.
And basically what Barclay's saying here is that he says that Jesus is saying that you can't keep God out of any transaction because he's already there.
Okay.
So because his footstool, the earth is his footstool, Jerusalem is his city. The man's head doesn't belong to him. He can't make a hair grow, white or black. His life is God's, and there's nothing in the world which does not belong to God. And therefore, whether God is actually named in so many words or not does not matter. God is already there.
Okay.
So God's already part of the equation.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
I've had people ask me along the way stuff like, what does it mean to make an oath? Because there seems to be places in the Bible where that might be the case differently. Let me take us to 2 Corinthians 1:18. But as surely as God is faithful, our message to you is not yes and no. For the Son of God, Jesus Christ, who was preached among you by us, by me, and Silas and Timothy, was not yes or no, but in him it's always been yes. Now, the Apostle Paul seems to say, well, there's a message. This isn't double talk. There's some kind of a covenant or a faithfulness that God's character is revealing.
Right.
And so in that case, you can say it. What I was looking at was, these qualifications of our oaths. They have to be consistent with God's character. And so who are we to say, we can declare, we can swear by heaven because we don't have the authority to say that.
Right.
Or we could swear by earth. Well, we didn't create the earth.
Right.
Or we could swear by Jerusalem. Well, that's the heavenly city, and we're not the king of that.
Right.
We certainly can not swear by God. I mean, it just goes on and on. He's kind of stripping us of, be real careful about what it is you're saying here, and you need to have some integrity and truthful in what you say. Mm-hmm. And so what I find when everything else comes from the evil one, when I think of that, now I'm thinking of James 5, and let me read this in for a minute. This is an area where the brothers and sisters of the Lord Jesus Christ were told to persevere, to be patient, like a farmer waiting for a crop. There were people that were oppressing these people. Uh-huh. And then at the very end, in James 5:12, he says, "And above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear, not by heaven, not by earth, or anything else. Let your yes be yes and your no be no, or you'll be condemned." Well, oaths were not totally prohibited in Judaism, and primarily because of the frequency of oaths being allowed in the Old Testament. There are times where they're made. But in the Jewish teaching, it's frivolous swearing that's prohibited.
Right.
So I think there's what he's saying is you better watch your mouth here. I think that's kind of where Jesus is going in Matthew 5.
Yeah, I think, and that's part of what Barclay brings up is just this kind of, using it in such a way to either hold people to things that you really don't need to, or using it as ways to get out of oaths. And in the end, where Barclay goes is that, and I think where Jesus is going is, you should be leading and living a life that makes it such that oaths aren't required, right? So yes. You should be of such upstanding, living a life that's beyond reproach that it shouldn't be an issue, And so, because and. Barclay goes to the point of, well, it's necessary at some level to take oaths from men because the world is evil and people will lie. And so, unfortunately,
that's a good point.
You have to put them under oath to get the truth out of people. But he says the truly good man will never need to take an oath. The truth of his sayings and the reality of his promises need no such guarantee. And I think the obligation then, as Jesus puts it on us, is to go, okay, what kind of life are you living that, people either feel they need to require an oath of you or they don't. And it needs to come down to that point of, are we people of integrity or aren't we?
Yeah.
And those disciples of Christ should be leading lives that people go, I can take his word for it.
Yeah, when he said, you heard it said before in here, again, you've heard it was said to the people long ago. He is pointing to, I think it's Leviticus 19, and then there's another spot in Numbers that talks about not to swear falsely and stuff like that. So he is taking them back to, you've heard this. But like the prophets who made the statements, they were the ones speaking to the people over the long periods of time. The thing is that they were under great trial and tribulation, and they had to persevere. But most importantly, their speech needed to be absolute truthfulness.
Right.
They just had to. Yep. So I think in a sense, Jesus is saying, okay, so you better be truthful. You can't waffle and shift. God doesn't change. He doesn't shift. He doesn't waffle. So you can't really do that. You just need to say yes, or you need to say no.
Right.
And otherwise, you're hedging your bet, man, and you're straddling the fence.
Yeah, and in Hebrews, he makes the point, and this is, I think, Barclay's point about why, some people feel an oath is required. God, when he makes his promise to Abraham and he swears that oath to Abraham, he doesn't swear by anything earthly. He swears by himself, And so I think for me, it's like, well, okay, if that's what God's going to swear by, I need to stay, I need to not be doing that because I'm not God. I don't have that right. I don't have that privilege to swear by him or by anything he's made because, I'm here today and what is it? A wisp of smoke or whatever. Dust I'll return until Jesus comes again. And so what right have I to swear by anything God swears by?
Yeah.
And we have to be careful. I think, we need to be, if you make vows and you make promises, you should keep them.
Well, something you and I have talked about over the years is, and you've had some pretty nice lessons, I think, come against you that we joke about now, but you'll say, I'm going to make a declaration. I'm not doing this again, right? You've done this.
Yeah.
You're like, and the next thing you know, man, the devil, the spiritual warfare is like, oh, I'll take that bet.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, I'm just using you because recently we've had those conversations.
Yep.
Well, so here's the deal. I believe what he's saying about oaths is God is in control, so don't take the bait to think that you're in control. When he goes to as much to say, please don't swear by your head. You can't even make one hair white or black. Well, now here's where I'm going to go with this. I'm going to go to a modern illustration. And we see it all the time. People dye their hair to feel different.
Yep.
They dye their hair all the time. You were telling me a story once about hearing your daughter's side of the story of putting a blue streak in her hair, making her hair blue, remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, and when you heard her heart of where she was coming from, it made a lot of sense to you.
Yeah.
Right, wrong, or indifferent, okay?
Yep.
However you want to judge it.
Yep.
So what happens is when we're being pressurized or when we feel like we don't have any control, I don't know what your daughter said to you, but I'm just saying in general, okay, I don't want to change gears for a minute, is that we do things. And so we change our hair color, we change this, we make, I won't do that again, I raise my hand, the politicians, every one of them that gets in the office, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and I will uphold the Constitution, and then it's like, really?
Right.
Have you even done it once since you got in? And I'm not picking on any politician specifically, but
right. No, I know
it'd be
what
easy
you're saying,
to pick
though.
on a few that are close by.
Yep.
So the point is, I think there's some wisdom in this. And to me, I'll kind of make this my closing thought on this. The wisdom on this, what I'm seeing of Jesus' teaching is, you are not in control, God is.
Right.
Okay? Say yes or say no, and trust God. Because as soon as you start moving into an area that's outside your dominion, whether it's heaven or God's name or the holy city of Jerusalem or whatever it is you're going to say, the evil one is going to be right there.
Yeah.
He's going to be right there. And then you're going to get pressurized and you're not going to pass the test. That's kind of how I get it.
Yeah, I think for us, for me, it's that thing of the obligation falls on us to be leading exemplary lives as best we can in a sinful world.
By faith in a sinful world.
And so that, oaths, at least of us, should not be required. We should be men of integrity, women of integrity. We should be, living a life outside of what the world what's the norm in the world, and people should look at us and go, I don't need an oath from that person. He's a person of integrity. He's a person of rightness. He's a righteous person. He's going to keep his word, and that's the way it should be. I know that's not how it is, but that's what I think his point is. Jesus' point is, if you're leaving a spirit-filled life, Christ's life should be living through you and out of you, and it's that whole salt of the earth and light to the world and all that. And if we're doing that, then we shouldn't need to make promises and
now
oaths.
This isn't my closing thought here, but because I'm already done, but it just is illustration fun. My wife Lisa, I told you a while back, not too long ago, she made this statement: "Pray before you say." Okay, and that's
kidding.
such a great statement. And this week, she's been really challenged, and overall, I think she's doing a great job. She's trying really hard to pray before she says, before she say, because she's had a lot of interesting pressurized things around her. So, we're going to get pressurized. Just trust God.